اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الرحمن علم القرآن خلق الإنسان علمه البيان. الشمس والقمر بحسبان والنجم والشجر يسجدان. والسماء رفعها ووضع الميزان ألا تطغوا في الميزان وأقيموا الوزن بالقسط ولا تخسروا والميزان. والأرض وزعها للأنام فيها فاكهة والنخل ذات الأكمام والهب ذو العصف والريحان. فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان؟ خلق الإنسان من صلصال كالفخار وخلق الجان من مارج من نار. فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان؟ رب المشرقين ورب المغربين. فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان؟ مرج البحرين يلتقيان بينهما برزخ لا يبغيان. فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان؟ يخرج منهما اللؤلؤ والمرجان. فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان؟ وله الجوار المنشأة في البحر كالأعلام. فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان؟ كل من عليها فان ويبقى وجه ربك ذو الجلال والإكرام. فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان؟ يسأله من في السماوات والأرض من في السماوات والأرض كل يوم هو في شأن. فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان؟ سنفرغ لكم أيها الثقلان. فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان؟ يا معشر الجن والإنس إن استطعتم أن تنفذوا من أقطار السماوات والأرض فانفذوا لا تنفذون إلا بسلطان. فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان؟ يرسل عليكما شواظ من نار والنحاس فلا تنتصران. فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان؟ فإذا انشقت السماء فكانت وردة كالدهان. فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان؟ فيومئذ لا يسأل عن ذنبه إنس ولا جان. فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان؟ يعرف المجرمون بسيماهم فيؤخذ بالنواسي والأقدام. فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان؟ هذه جهنم التي يكذب بها المجرمون يطوفون بينها وبين حميم آن فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان ولمن خاف مقام ربه جنتان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان ذواتا أفنان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان فيهما عينان تجريان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان فيهما من كل فاكهة زوجان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان متكئين على فرش بطائنها من استبرق وجنى الجنتين دان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان فيهن قاصرات الطرف لم يطمثهن إنس قبلهم ولا جان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان كأنهن الياقوت والمرجان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان هل جزاء الإحسان إلا الإحسان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان ومن دونهما جنتان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان مدحمتان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان فيهما عينان نضاختان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان فيهما فاكهة ونخل ورمان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان فيهن خيرات حسان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان جور مقصورات في الخيام فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان لم يطمثهن إنس قبلهم ولا جان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان متكئين على رفرف خضر وعبقري حسان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان تبارك اسم ربك ذي الجلال والإكرام صدق الله العلي العظيم.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله والله أكبر. الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. اللهم صل على محمد. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. أشهد أن عليا ولي الله. أشهد أن عليا حجة الله. حي على الصلاة. حي على الصلاة. حي على الفلاح. حي على الفلاح. حي على خير العمل. حي على خير العمل. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله. لا إله إلا الله. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما.
أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم. أشهد أن محمد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم. وأن عليا ولي الله عليه الصلاة والسلام. حي على الصلاة. حي على الصلاة. حي على الفلاح. حي على الفلاح. حي على خير العمل. حي على خير العمل. قد قامت الصلاة. قد قامت الصلاة. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله. استغفر الله من كل ذنب وأتوب إليه إنه كان توابا. الله أكبر. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إنا أعطيناك الكوثر فصل لربك وانحر إن شانئك هو الأبتر. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. سميع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد وأركع وأسجد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. كذلك الله ربنا الله أكبر. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. الحمد لله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وتقبل شفاعته في أمته وارفع درجته بحول الله وقوته. أقوم وأقعد وأركع وأسجد. سبحان سبحان سبحان. أستغفر الله من كل ذنب وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. سمع الله لمن حمد. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم واحشرنا معهم ولعن أعداءهم. الله أكبر. بسم الله وبالله والحمد لله وخير الأسماء الحسنى لله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. لا إله إلا الله. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أستغفر الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم ذو الجلال والإكرام وأتوب إليه. أستغفر الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم ذو الجلال والإكرام وأتوب إليه. أستغفر الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم ذو الجلال والإكرام وأتوب إليه. اللهم صل على محمد. أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم. أشهد أن محمد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم وأن عليا حجة الله عليه الصلاة والسلام. حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على خير العمل حي على خير العمل. قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله. استغفر الله من كل ذنب وأتوب إليه إنه كان توابا. الله أكبر. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. سمع له لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد وأركع وأسجد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. كذلك الله ربنا. الله أكبر. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. سمع له لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. الحمد لله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وتقبل شفاعته في أمته وارفع درجته. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد وأركع وأسجد. سبحان الله. لا إله إلا الله. سبحان الله. استغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. سمع له لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. استغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد وأركع وأسجد. أستغفر الله من كل ذنب وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم وترحم على عجزنا وأغثنا بحقهم. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. إلهي عظم ذنب من عبدك فليحسن العفو من عندك يا كريم بحق محمد وآله الطاهرين. الله أكبر. بسم الله وبالله والحمد لله وخير الأسماء الحسنى لله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. لا إله إلا الله. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أستغفر الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم ذو الجلال والإكرام وأتوب إليه. أستغفر الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم ذو الجلال والإكرام وأتوب إليه. أستغفر الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم ذو الجلال والإكرام وأتوب إليه. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آله.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم إني أسألك برحمتك التي وسعت كل شيء وبقوتك التي قهرت بها كل شيء وخضع لها كل شيء وذل لها كل شيء وبجبروتك التي غلبت بها كل شيء وبعزتك التي لا يقوم لها شيء وبعظمتك التي ملأت كل شيء وبسلطانك الذي على كل شيء وبوجهك الباقي بعد فناء كل شيء وبأسمائك التي ملأت أركان كل شيء وبعلمك الذي أحاط بكل شيء وبنور وجهك الذي أضاء له كل شيء. يا نور يا قدوس يا أول الأولين ويا آخر الآخرين، اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تهتك العصام، اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تنزل النقم، اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تغير النعم، اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تحبس الدعاء، اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تقطع الرجاء، اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تنزل البلاء، اللهم اغفر لي كل ذنب أذنبته وكل خطيئة أخطأتها. اللهم إني أتقرب إليك بذكرك وأستشفع بك إلى نفسك وأسألك بجودك أن تدنيني من قربك وأن توزعني شكرك وأن تلهمني ذكرك. اللهم إني أسألك سؤال خاضع متذلل خاشع أن تسامحني وترحمني وتجعلني بقسمك راضيا قانعا وفي جميع الأحوال متواضعا. اللهم وأسألك سؤال من اشتدت فاقته وأنزل بك عند الشدائد حاجته وعظم فيما عندك رغبته. اللهم عظم سلطانك وعلى مكانك وخفي مكرك وظهر أمرك وغلب قهرك وجرت قدرتك ولا يمكن الفرار من حكومتك. اللهم لا أجد لذنوبي غافرا ولا لقبائحي ساطرا ولا لشيء من عملي القبيح بالحسن مبدلا غيرك، لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك وبحمدك. ظلمت نفسي وتجرأت بجهلي وسكنت إلى قديم ذكرك لي ومنك علي. اللهم مولاي كم من قبيح سترته وكم من فادح من البلاء أقلته وكم من عثار وقيته وكم من مكروه دفعته وكم من ثناء جميل لست أهلا له نشرته. اللهم عظم بلائي وأفرط بي سوء حالي وقصرت بي أعمالي وكعدت بي أغلالي وحبسني عن نفعي بعد أملي وخدعتني الدنيا بغرورها ونفسي بجنايتها ومطالي يا سيدي. فأسألك بعزتك أن لا يحجب عنك دعائي سوء عملي وفعالي ولا تفتحني بخفي ما اطلعت عليه من سري ولا تعاجلني بالعقوبة على ما عملته في خلواتي من سوء فعلي وإساءتي ودوام تفريطي وجهالتي وكثرة شهواتي وغفلتي. وكن اللهم بعزتك لي في كل الأحوال رؤوفا وعلي في جميع الأمور عطوفا. إلهي وربي من لي غيرك، أسأله كشف ضري والنظر في أمري. إلهي ومولاي أجريت علي حكما اتبعت فيه هوى نفسي ولم أحترس فيه من تزيين عدوي، فغرني بما أهوى وأسعده على ذلك القضاء، فتجاوزت بما جرى علي من ذلك بعض حدودك، وخالفت بعض أوامرك، فلك الحجة علي في جميع ذلك، ولا حجة لي فيما جرى علي فيه قضاؤك، وألزمني حكمك وبلاؤك. وقد أتيتك يا إلهي بعد تقصيري وإسرافي على نفسي، معتذرا نادما منكسرا مستقيلا، مستغفرا منيبا مقرا مذعنا معترفا، لا أجد مفرا مما كان مني ولا مفزعا أتوجه إليه في أمري غير قبولك عذري وإدخالك إياي في سعة من رحمتك. اللهم فاقبل عذري وارحم شدة ضري، وفكني من شدي وثاقي. يا رب ارحم ضعف بدني ورقة جلدي ودقة عظمي، يا من بدأ خلقي وذكري وتربيتي وبري وتغذيتي. هبني لابتداء كرمك وسالفي برك بي. يا إلهي وسيدي وربي، أتراك معذبي بنارك بعد توحيدك، وبعد من طوى عليه قلبي من معرفتك، ولهج به لساني من ذكرك، واعتقده ضميري من حبك، وبعد صدق اعترافي ودعائي خاضعا لربوبيتك. هيهات أنت أكرم من أن تضيع من ربيت، أو تبعد من أدنيت، أو تشرد من آويت، أو تسلم إلى البلاء من كفيته ورحمت. وليت شعري يا سيدي وإلهي ومولاي، أتسلط النار على وجوه خرت لعظمتك ساجدا، وعلى ألسن نطقت بتوحيدك صادقة، وبشكرك مادحة، وعلى قلوب اعترفت بإلهيتك محققة، وعلى ضمائر حوت من العلم بك حتى صارت خاشعة، وعلى جوارح سعت إلى أوطان تعبدك طائعة، وأشارت باستغفارك مذعنا. ما هكذا الظن بك، ولا أخبرنا بفضلك عنك يا كريم. يا ربي وأنت تعلم ضعفي عن قليل من بلاء الدنيا وعقوباتها، وما يجري فيها من المكاره على أهلها، على أن ذلك بلاء ومكروه، قليل مكثوه، يسير بقاؤه، قصير مدته. فكيف احتمالي لبلاء الآخرة وجليل وقوع المكاره فيها، وهو بلاء تطول مدته ويدوم مقامه، ولا يخفف عن أهله، لأنه لا يكون إلا عن غضبك وانتقامك وسخطك، وهذا ما لا تقوم له السماوات والأرض. يا سيدي فكيف بي وأنا عبدك الضعيف الذليل الحقير المسكين المستكين. يا إلهي وربي وسيدي ومولاي، لأي الأمور إليك أشكو، ولما منها أضج وأبكي، لأليم العذاب وشدته أم لطول البلاء ومدته؟ فلئن صيرتني للعقوبات مع أعدائك، وجمعت بيني وبين أهل بلائك، وفرقت بيني وبين أحبائك وأوليائك، فهبني يا إلهي وسيدي ومولاي وربي. صبرت على عذابك، فكيف أصبر على فراقك؟ وهبني صبرت على حر نارك، فكيف أصبر عن النظر إلى كرامتك؟ أم كيف أسكن في النار ورجائي عفوك؟ فبعزتك يا سيدي ومولاي أقسم صادقا لئن تركتني ناطقا لأذجن إليك بين أهلها ضجيج الآملين ولأصرخن إليك صراخ المستصرخين ولأبكين عليك بكاء الفاقدين ولأنادينك أين كنت يا ولي المؤمنين يا غاية آمال العارفين يا غياث المستغيثين يا حبيب قلوب الصادقين ويا إله العالمين أفتراك سبحانك يا إلهي وبحمدك تسمع فيها صوت عبد مسلم سجن فيها بمخالفته وذاق طعم عذابها بمعصيته وحبس بين أطباقها بجرمه وجريرته وهو يضج إليك ضجيج مؤمل لرحمتك ويناديك بلسان أهل توحيدك ويتوسل إليك بربوبيتك يا مولاي فكيف يبقى في العذاب وهو يرجو ما سلف من حلمك أم كيف تؤلمه النار وهو يأمل فضلك ورحمتك أم كيف يهرقه لهيبها وأنت تسمع صوته وترى مكانه أم كيف يشتمل عليه زفيرها وأنت تعلم ضعفا أم كيف يتقلقل بين أطباقها وأنت تعلم صدقا أم كيف تزجره زبانيتها وهو يناديك يا ربا أم كيف يرجو فضلك في عتقه منها فتتركه فيها هيهات ما ذلك الظن بك ولا المعروف من فضلك ولا مشبه لما عاملت به الموحدين من برك وإحسانك فباليقين أقطع لولا ما حكمت به من تعظيم جاحديك وقضيت به من إخلاد معانديك لجعلت النار كلها بردا وسلاما وما كان لأحد فيها مقرا ولا مقاما لكنك تقدست أسماؤك أقسمت أن تملأها من الكافرين من الجنة والناس أجمعين وأن تخلد فيها المعاندين وأن تجل ثناؤك قلت مبتدئا وتطولت بالإنعام متكرما أفمن كان مؤمنا كمن كان فاسقا لا يستوون إلهي وسيدي فأسألك بالقدرة التي قدرتها وبالقضية التي حتمتها وحكمتها وغلبت من عليه أجريتها أن تهب لي في هذه الليلة وفي هذه الساعة كل جرم أجرمت وكل ذنب أذنبت وكل قبيح أسررت وكل جهل عملته كتمته أو أعلنت أخفيته أو أظهرته وكل سيئة أمرت بإثباتها الكرام الكاتبين الذين وكلتهم بحفظ ما يكون مني وجعلتهم شهودا علي مع جوارحي وكنت أنت الرقيب علي من ورائهم والشاهد لما خفي عنهم وبرحمتك أخفيت وبفضلك سترت وأن توفر حظي من كل خير أنزلت أو إحسان فضلت أو بر نشرت أو رزق بسطت أو ذنب تغفره أو خطأ تستره يا ربي يا ربي يا رب يا إلهي وسيدي ومولاي ومالك رقي يا من بيده ناصيتي يا عليما بضري ومسكنتي يا خبيرا بفقري وفاقتي يا ربي يا ربي يا رب أسألك بحقك وقدسك وعظم صفاتك وأسمائك أن تجعل أوقاتي في الليل والنهار بذكرك معمورا وبخدمتك موصولا وأعمالي عندك مقبولا حتى تكون أعمالي وأورادي كلها وردا واحدا وحالي في خدمتك سرمدا يا سيدي يا من عليه معولي يا من إليه شكوت أحوالي يا ربي يا ربي يا رب قو على خدمتك جوارحي واشدد على العظيمة جوانحي وهب لي الجد في خشيتك والدوام في الاتصال بخدمتك حتى أسرح إليك في ميادين السابقين وأسرع إليك في المبادرين وأشتاق إلى قربك في المشتاقين وأدنو منك دنو المخلصين وأخافك مخافة الموقنين وأجتمع في جوارك مع المؤمنين اللهم ومن أرادني بسوء فأرد ومن كادني فكد واجعلني من أحسن عبيدك نصيبا عندك وأقربهم منزلة منك وأخصهم زلفة لديك فإنه لا ينال ذلك إلا بفضلك وجد لي بجودك واعطف علي بمجدك واحفظني برحمتك واجعل لساني بذكرك لهجا وقلبي بحبك متيما ومن علي بحسن إجابتك وأقلني عثرتي واغفر زلتي فإنك قضيت على عبادك بعبادتك وأمرتهم بدعائك وضمنت لهم الإجابة فإليك يا ربي نصبت وجهي وإليك يا ربي مددت يدي فبعزتك استجب لي دعائي وبلغني منايا ولا تقطع من فضلك رجائي واكفني شر الجن والإنس من أعدائي يا سريع الرضا اغفر لمن لا يملك إلا الدعاء فإنك فعال لما تشاء يا من اسمه دواء وذكره شفاء وطاعته غنى ارحم من رأس ماله الرجاء وسلاحه البكاء يا سابغ النعم يا دافع النقم يا نور المستوحشين في الظلام يا عالما لا يعلم صل على محمد وآل محمد وافعل بي ما أنت أهله وصلى الله على رسوله والأئمة الميامين من آله وسلم تسليما كثيرا كثيرا
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
سورة مبارك الفاتحة. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Sayyid Hasan Rizvi, respected elders, dear brothers and sisters in Iman, Assalamu alaikum jamia wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Surah Fatiha is requested for all marhumin listed on the screen, as well as all other marhumin. Surah Mubarak al-Fatiha. Dua Shfa Maries is requested for all those in need here and elsewhere, as well as those listed on the screen. Let us recite together. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. أَمَّنْ يُجِيبُ الْمُضْطَرَّ إِذَا دَعَاهُ وَيَكْشِفُ السُّوءَ 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 أَمَّنْ يُجِيبُ الْمُضْطَرَّ إِذَا دَعَاهُ وَيَكْشِفُ السُّوءَ. Ya Allah. Reminder that the Yawm Gham program on Sunday will inshallah begin with Maghribain Salat at 8:20 p.m. and not at 8:05 per the newsletter. Tonight, we'll inshallah have our interactive session with Sayyid Hasan Rizvi. A kind request to please use the mic if you are to talk so that our online viewers may be able to hear. Let us now invite Sayyid for tonight's interactive discussion, where Muhammad wa Muhammad salawat.
Want me to keep it? So you want me to go pass it around then? أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين صلوات على محمد وعلى محمد صلى على محمد مؤمنين مؤمنات, brothers and sisters in Islam and Iman, Salamun alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Sorry, I'm just picking some colors right now. So, before we get started, inshallah, it's nice to see you all again, right? It's been a long break. I'm surprised, but I did miss you guys when I was over in Phoenix, yeah. I'm surprised you're hearing me say that too, but no. Going to other communities really does give me perspective on appreciating what we have over here. So, alhamdulillah, it's nice to be back. Unfortunately, the first thing I have to address now that I've come back is some recent fitnas that have come about, which have been around for a while, but they've recently more directly hit Orlando. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that today. Before I do that, just one quick announcement as well. Most of you have seen the flyer, right? So we've been having these Mizan Institute sessions and courses every few months. The initial one, which was proctored by Sheikh Mehdi Rastani, was about the secrets of Salah. Then, very recently, I think it was about 2 months ago, Sheikh Amin Rastani had a class on death and barzakh. And we have the next course lined up for the weekend of May 14th and 15th, which will be about free will and predestination, which again is a topic that most of us are still confused about. So sign-ups are still open, registration still open. We're looking for a certain number of registrants though. We haven't hit that mark yet. And we're a little surprised it hasn't happened, maybe because it wasn't announced too much. I know you people scroll by the newsletter a lot. We ignore all these messages. So we want to make sure people, if you're interested, sign up sooner rather than later, because if we don't hit that mark, then we may have to postpone or cancel the class altogether, right? If we don't hit that specific mark, okay? So again, the class is for Death and Barzakh. It's a two-day course, May 14th and 15th, Saturday and Sunday. You can check the flyer out. Just make sure you go, I think it's mizaninstitute.org/Orlando or something like that. Just check the messages and you can sign up for it then. Hopefully we'll see some more registrants and we'll be able to keep the course going, inshallah. Okay. Please recite a salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Now, so the title of our session tonight is God centricity versus egocentricity. And if you've been paying attention to recent events over the past few years, different ideas pushed by certain speakers, I think you have an idea of what exactly we're supposed to be talking about. Especially with the subheading that we chose, is human intuition a real guide to truth and reform? So firstly, I want to just introduce a few points. The first question I think which is important is why? Why are we talking about this? Because these ideas and these speakers have been around for a while, right? Particularly this individual. And they've been pushing this idea and these ideas for a long time, and we've never directly addressed it here at least. Maybe other speakers or organizations have, but we've never really done that in the past 2 years. Indirectly, I think a few times in some of the speeches we've talked about it, but never in this kind of fashion. So you might be thinking, okay, well, why now? I mean, the obvious reason would be that this individual was privately invited and spoke here in Orlando for a few nights. So now you're saying, why aren't you mentioning the person by name? So originally, we actually had the name of the individual on the flyer because we wanted to make sure it was clear for everybody what was being discussed and who we were talking about, whose ideas. After consulting with various individuals, various ulama, they said, look, due to the nature of the conversation and the ideas, which inshallah what we'll present is that these are not just differences of opinion. These are dangerous ideas. And I would actually go out on a limb here and say that these are shaitani ideas too. I didn't have this position before, but after going through this stuff, I think these are very, very dark, dangerous, satanic sort of notions that are being pushed. So I don't want to, hold back on this idea. So that's why we don't want to get free publicity and things like that. Now, some of you might be asking, look, if this is so dark and satanic and problematic, well, where's all the support coming from then? Why are so many people attracted to this idea and going and supporting, both in idea, meaning they believe in this stuff now, or the more dangerous part, financially, right? There's a lot of support going for this movement and these institutions and this individual. So why? Well, without going into too much detail, because we've talked about this stuff on, other programs. Most of us, and this is where I think this individual and I would actually agree, most of us have been taught, we'd say, a very weak or deficient version of Islam. Our idea of God is not the God of the Ahlul Bayt. Now, it's good. We got Allah Ek, Panjatan Panch, and all that stuff. That's wonderful, right? We learned on namaz, and we learned how to do roza. Like, that's great. Again, I'm not trying to diminish anybody's tarbiyat and how we've been raised, but there's a lot of depth to Islam, a lot of breadth to Islam that we haven't been able to get since we were younger. And that's caused a lot of issues. When that gap is there, and then because of a lack of, I'd say, proper Islamic tarbiyah as well, tarbiyah in the household, meaning because of lack of information, maybe we weren't raised in the ideal sense, right? Like I've mentioned before, sometimes we got that Hitler Islam, which was just follow the rules because I said so, right? Which is not what the Ahlul Bayt had taught. Or sometimes people had to make up for that by saying, okay, we have madrasas and Sunday schools and all these other programs which will make up for it. Whether Thursday night programs, shahadat, waladat, all these things. But okay, fine. But again, the problem still is those same individuals who, again, with good intentions, who are sincere, who are dedicating their time and effort and everything for free, they may not be the best representatives of Islam themselves, either because of, let's say, bad akhlaq, or maybe because they themselves have their own doubts in iman. If there's a sister, for example, sorry, I don't mean to pick on sisters, but this is usually the example that's given for madrasa stuff. If there's a sister who's a teacher, and she's teaching about the fiqh of hijab, but she's only wearing it because it's in madrasa, and the minute she walks out, she takes off the hijab, don't you think the kids are going to notice? I mean, I'm telling you they notice because they come and tell me too. They're like, why would I bother listening to this teacher about things like hijab or anything about Islam if she herself is not practicing? Which is a valid point, right? You can't discount that. Or a lot of other things about questions that are being raised in madrasas that are not answered properly, right? Again, I'm not saying that people are bad or mean and this is wrong. We just have to call it how it is, like how I've grown up, and I'm sure a lot of you maybe have gotten the same background in terms of a lack of proper Islamic education, right? So then, on top of that, the last variable is this. We are here living in the West. Some of you born and raised, some of you came later, emigrated, and have been raised. So the values that we all have now, a lot of it, especially if you've been inculcated in a public schooling system here, it's all going to be secular, liberalism, individualism, humanism. So you've got all these factors now. Let's go back, right? We've got a community, or some communities, which are not providing a in-depth, proper, full Islamic education, right? The member is not going to solve all of that. There might be issues in terms of tarbiyah. Our parenting and the way that we are raised may have been deficient a little bit. We've got the problems in the madrasa stuff. We've got speakers who are coming who may not be giving us depth in Islam too. And then we're raised in an environment which is giving us a lot of values which are completely antithetical and contradictory to Islam. So you put all that stuff together, then when somebody comes and says, you don't have to observe hijab, then obviously it's going to sound really enticing because they're saying you can believe in God, believe in the Quran, believe in the Ahlul Bayt, but these things which you don't like, which were always a question for you, guess what? We can find a way, we can find a loophole for you. We can find a way out of it. Obviously, people are going to be attracted to that. And of course, they're going to support something like that. And in a sense, that's actually a good thing. Because deep down, these supporters, these individuals, they're obviously good people. They've been trying to have their intellectual curiosity and that thirst fulfilled and quenched, which is good. They want to hold on to Islam and the Islam of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, which is also good. So the issue is that the way that, let's say we have this sort of problematic orthodox or conservative teaching, the problem is that it's been self-corrected or overcorrected from the other side of a very liberal, extreme sort of version too. There's some sort of balance in the middle that we have to achieve, right? And again, so I'm saying, I am calling out the orthodox way, the conservative traditional way that a lot of us are used to. I'm calling that out, 100%. This is where I think this individual and I would agree. The problem is that the solution is equally, if not more so problematic. because it calls into question a lot of basic ideas that you and I have grown up with, and which should be obvious, but now they're being, kind of destroyed and flushed down the toilet. So that's sort of two things, right? So why we're not using his name, I mentioned. Why so much support? There. Now, a lot of people have also been saying, because they found out, I went to some of these sessions. Like, Sayyid, why did you go to these things? If it's so dangerous, it's so bad, why'd you go? Well, without takabbur, without any ego, you and I are a little different, right? When I go to these sessions, if I hear another speaker or another scholar, or if I read an Islamic book, or any book on any religious idea, I think my ability to parse through these ideas is going to be slightly different than the vast majority of you, right? Again, without being too arrogant. Let's be honest, right? In the same way, if any of you here have a medical background, I can go through some medical literature, but I'm not going to be able to understand it the same way somebody who's classically trained in med school, right? So it's going to be different. And specifically, very specifically me, for those of you who know me very well, is that even before I was religious, I was always getting into arguments and debates. I did Model UN in college. So I am primed to take arguments and break them down as far as possible, right? So I'm trained for this stuff, and look, I'm good at it, okay? I know what I'm doing, right? So that's why I went, is I needed to hear this stuff firsthand. I've known about these ideas and these thoughts and this speaker for a long time. I've known about it. I've heard some of the speeches. I've read some excerpts of the works. I know this stuff because it's not new. These same ideas have been around in Iraq and Iran for years. The thing is, they were debated over there and they were destroyed. They were defeated. The problem is that nobody in the English-speaking world knew about it. So now, all of a sudden, it's over here, and it sounds fresh and brand new to us, but anybody who's over there is like, yeah, this stuff has been done and we're over with. Like, what are you guys talking about? So this individual, it's not his ideas. This is not brand new stuff. His explanation of it is slightly strange. It's new. He's got a different version of it. But the idea of, this sort of liberal Islam or having intuition or, time and place changing laws, this is not a new idea. It's been around and it has been debunked and debated. The difference was that this happened within the Hawza. This happened within the seminary. This happened within the universities. It happened amongst people who knew what they were talking about. So that when somebody would bring an ayah of Quran, they'd say, okay, let's reply with an ayah of Quran. Let's go with the different tafsir. If somebody gives a hadith, they'd say, look, that hadith, whether authentic or not, here's the misunderstanding you might have. So this stuff happened and it's been done, right? That's it. Okay. The other reason that I went as well, again, besides my own intellectual curiosity, besides me wanting to give an honest sort of analysis and say, look, I want to hear it from this individual firsthand, not through somebody else, not through even some clips online or whatever. Let me go and see the individual. Let me hear him. Let me meet him, say salam, right, and see what's going on. Hear it for myself. Because if I actually do end up disagreeing, which it was very clear from the first sentence that came out of his mouth, I disagreed a lot, and then every single sentence, right, there was a lot of issues, is that now, if any of the supporters say, who are you to respond? You don't know what he's talking about. I was sitting there for every single line, every single sentence. I'm not taking anything out of context. I have the full context. And I stayed there for Q&A sessions afterwards too. So I know exactly what was happening. So you can't use that response to me now that, you're out on a mission. Well, I am on a mission, but I think I've got enough background, personally, meaning I've been there, and from the theoretical standpoint. So that's another reason why I went, so that I had to cover my back, basically, right? And the final point that I wanted to kind of just start off as a disclaimer is this. Like, okay, well, still, why are we addressing this though? If it's meant for the Hawza, if it's meant for the seminary and other things, why are we doing it? Well, because a surprising amount of community members did attend these sessions. I was a bit shocked. And I was even more shocked that parents were bringing their kids there, which I'm very surprised at. The reason I think that people did that, and this is where I need to jump on you guys, attack a little bit. When I say you guys, I don't mean you. I mean, the euphemistic you, that people who decided to attend. Because when I question people about it, they said, we know this stuff is strange and it's weird, it's unorthodox, but it gets us to think. And my iman is strong enough where I can tell what's right and what's wrong or what makes sense and what doesn't. Now look, that sounds nice when it comes out of your mouth. It sounds nice on paper. But there's a lot of arrogance sitting in that statement. That I have enough iman to tell the difference between right and wrong. I have enough iman to listen to the preachings of somebody who's an excellent orator, a beautiful orator. Right? You can't be British accents. Come on, take a British accent versus a Jersey accent, it's no contest, right? So it's not going to work, right? Especially when it comes off very aggressive like I do, right? So I think people overestimate their abilities. Again, I'm not trying to be mean, but I think we need to be very honest. Like I've told you guys before, if I want to disprove that God exists, I can do that for you. I guarantee it. If I want to disprove Shiism for you, I know I can do that. Because I know how to frame arguments. And a good speaker knows how to frame arguments too. So if you don't have the background in the Quran, because he's well versed in the Quran, if you don't have background in the way that hadith are utilized, and these things are being utilized in front of you, what kind of response do you have? Except that this just doesn't sound right? That's not going to be enough. And they'll say, look, you don't have proof, but I've got proof from the Quran, from hadith, from the aql, all these ideas. So he said, look, this is the critical thinking that you're not applying, but I'm applying it. So it's going to make the individual feel like, kind of inferior to a degree. And then some other individuals, when they hear these arguments, again, very, I'd say terrible arguments, but they hear them because of the nature and the way that they're presented. And especially because there has been, on purpose, I'd say, no direct public challenge made to these ideas while the individual was there, then it is obviously going to sound really great, right? When you have just these one ideas come, and they're all flowery and all nice and put together with all these big fancy words that people, when I ask them what they mean, they have no idea what these big words mean, like existential and all this. All this stuff comes out, and people are just like, yeah, this sounds really good. And then I give them this one reply, like a 2-second response, and they're like, oh, I didn't see it from your perspective. I was like, yeah, I know. Because this individual is not giving both sides, unfortunately. They're only giving their own side. So I'd say this is where we have to kind of sit down and go through a lot of these ideas. If the supporters of this individual or these sort of ideas, if they're actually open-minded, if they're actually critical thinkers, which is what their whole movement seems to be about, no problem. I hope that you're sitting here right now, or at least listening online, and we'll be sending forward your questions and responses and objections. And if you're not here, if you're not interested, then I think you need to be honest with yourself about whether you're actually a critical thinker, whether you're open-minded and you're actually trying to research, or you're just picking and choosing whatever stuff suits your ego. And that's why this topic is God centricity versus egocentricity. Because what we'll try to establish is just that. It sounds like it's God at the top of the equation here, at the top of the hierarchy and pyramid, but it's not. This whole movement, these ideas are there to flip everything around so God is at the bottom and our own nafs and ego is at the top. It's to make you and I call the shots and tell God what is right and what is wrong. That's why I say this is satanic. And that it's very, very dangerous. Now, how that gets there, inshallah, we'll start to open it up now. If you can recite a salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Look, I've got pages and pages of notes. We have limited time. I don't want to sit here, right? It's supposed to be an interactive session, right? I wanted to go through that disclaimer first. I know some of you probably have ideas and questions on your own, in your mind. So I want to open the floor first before we start with anything. If we get that, awkward silence, which we normally do, then I'm going to jump right into the stuff. But part of it is going to be monologue, right? That's the nature of it. But I want people to be able to object, to respond, and to really push these ideas that we're going to be responding to. But if anybody has any ideas and questions off the bat that they want to go, Bismillah. Whether on the brothers or sisters side. Okay, you guys want me to talk? I'm going to talk. Oh, okay, thank you. Yeah. There we go.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
Can you explain in very layman's terms that even the youths can understand what exactly is the difference between God centricity and ego centricity?
Sure. Okay. Actually, that's probably the first point I was going to go through, so thank you so much. Okay. Okay. Now let's assume we're all here, right? That we have this belief in Allah, we have a belief in God. Okay. Now start from the bare minimum idea that, okay, all of us as believers in God, and then we'll take it a step further, we're Muslims. So you have a certain notion that we want to believe in God, follow Him, worship Him, and do all that. Okay. So then the question is, okay, well, God obviously has a bunch of, wants. He has commands. He has prohibitions. Right? He has this ideal for every single one of us, right? This idea of, to become a perfect human being. So the question is, how do we find that out? Where do we get Islamic knowledge from? This is where we open it up. Where do you get, so if you want to find out something about Islam, if you want to jump into the mind of God and figure out what He wants from us, how do we learn that? What are the sources that we use? It's the Quran, right? Right, so obviously that's one, right? So we have the Quran. What else? Hadith, okay. So over there I'm going to put Sunnah, right? And of course that means Sunnah of the Ahlul Bayt, alayhim salam. Oh no.
Okay. Technically, I have to do with that, right? Sorry, I got a math background too. I have to do stuff like that. For those who know what I'm talking about. Okay, what else? I'll give you a clue. There's two other ones. Intellect, ahsant, right? So I'm going to write aql, intellect. Anything else? This last one, most of you probably won't know, but normally this is something used when you're trying to derive Islamic law. Ahsant. Oh, very good. Ijma', which means consensus. Okay, now let me explain this one a little bit. So most scholars, most maraja will say, look, this ijma' consensus, what it is they say, look, let's say right now, because we know that we have books of hadith, we have the Quran and all this stuff, right? We know that throughout history, some of these books of ours have been burnt and destroyed and lost throughout time, right? When the Mongols had invaded, stuff was destroyed. So they said, look, it's very possible that there are a hadith, or there were a hadith, or there are books that you and I don't have anymore. And that might have had critical information, right? Like imagine, for example, that maybe at some point there was a hadith from the Imam that said, you know what? Maghrib, I can make that qasr for you too. You only do 1.5 rakats. Like, and we're missing that, you know, something like that. Or maybe even fajr, right? You only do 1 rakat. Like how nice would that have been? So there could have been lost information that we don't have. So one of the ways of determining that, they say, is, well, let's go back to the scholars, the Ahl al-Ijma, as they say, the ulama al-Ijma, the ones right at the time of those last few imams, especially the time of the ghaiba. They obviously had access to that stuff. So they say, look, let's see what their opinions are. If we look at their opinions and we see that, look, all of them are saying something, but we don't have the evidence for what they're saying, it seems very, very strange. They say, well, that at least is not by itself, but it's at least pointing to the fact that there should have been something at that time that they don't have, right? Maybe. That's the idea. So sometimes in certain cases they say, so that's why it's not really a separate source, it's pointing to the fact that there was probably some other sunnah, there's some ahadith that you and I don't have, that these ulama, like Shaykh Tusi, Shaykh Saduq, and the rest, they had it, we don't, and that's why we're seeing strange fatwa from them, and it points back to that. So, yeah, that's that. Make sense so far? Okay. So these are the various sources that we have over here for deriving anything in Islam, whether it's our theology, our philosophy, our laws too. This is the same way, that these are the same sources that we're going to use, all right? Now, all of these is basically what we would call God centricity, right? What? Oh, no. There goes green. Meaning that all of this stuff, sorry, yeah, so my pyramid's a little broken, but whatever, it's okay. The idea is God is at the top of all this, right? This is our way. These are the methods that we use to understand what God wants. Why? Because obviously this is God's word, right? The Quran is the word of God, which this person does not believe. That's a separate discussion, but the Quran is the word of God. The Sunnah of the Ahlul Bayt, they are the representatives of God. So they are also speaking on behalf of God because they have the right to. They've been appointed by God. Now the aql and intellect, that's also something which that's going to be a good amount of our discussion too. What does that actually mean? Because somebody might say, isn't this point right here, isn't that our contention then? Right? Can our aql actually figure things out? Like if my aql, if my intellect tells me that polygamy doesn't make sense anymore, shouldn't we get rid of it? Or hijab was back then, it made sense. Right now it doesn't make sense. That seems intuitive. It seems like an intellectual rational argument. Is that what we mean? We'll talk more about that inshallah. Normally how it's used though is different. So in law, for example, let me ask it this way. Is performing wudu wajib? Hold on. I got to pass the mic, yeah. Come on. There you go. Okay, you said it depends. What do you mean it depends?
It depends on the rukn. So if you're trying to do wajib namaz, you need to do obligatory to do. In certain no, not wajib.
Is the mic working? Sorry, it's not you. Hello? It's there, but the volume is really low, I think. Yeah, okay. There we go. Failure. No problem. I'll repeat what you were saying then, right? Okay. So for namaz, obviously we know that it's a preliminary. You have to pray. You have to perform wudu in order to pray namaz, right? So in a sense, even though Allah didn't directly, as far as what we have in hadith and in the Quran, it doesn't say it's wajib for you to perform wudu. It's saying that, look, if you're going to pray salah, and there's wajib salah, there's wajib namaz you have to do, in order for that to count, you have to perform wudu or tayammum, basically, right? You have to do some sort of purification. So our aql tells us then, by default, then that makes it wajib for a wajib prayer. Because you can't have one without the other. So that's not me jumping in with my own opinion. That's just giving a simple, if A is B, B is C, there's A is C. That's it. There's no room for opinion there. And that's where I think people, they mess this idea up. Is that they think aql means you can have opinions and think about stuff. It's not that. There should be a very direct, rational, logical relationship, which is very strict and stringent. It's not as easy as people think. Or another example that sometimes they give is this. So when you're able to, right, financially, emotionally, physically, all that, then Hajj becomes wajib on certain people, right? So, is buying a ticket to go for Hajj, is that wajib? Is getting a visa to go for Hajj wajib? So there's nothing in the Quran or Hadith that says, yeah, make sure you get your visa, do nothing like that, or get your tickets, book the hotel and all that. No. But we know that, okay, since Hajj is wajib, and the way for me to get there, the tariqah, the path for me requires X, Y, Z steps, then by default, X, Y, Z then are going to become wajib too. Because if I don't do that, I can't perform my wajibat. Yeah, you see how this is sort of, usually it's direct preliminaries, that's it. It's not me saying, well, I think this and I think that. No, these are things which every single mind should be able to comprehend without even really thinking about it. Most of you, me asking these questions, you're like, yeah, of course you have to do this stuff. Even though God hasn't directly, explicitly said, wudu is wajib, or buying a ticket is wajib. But these are things which are absolutely 100% necessary in order for you to get the wajib done. So that's what aql in this sense means too. Now that was law. There are other examples, but maybe another session, or if there's another question, we can answer that later on. Okay, so I think I explained everything there. So now, God centricity is like we're using any of these methods or this one as well. Now, where the curveball comes in is this. This is where I'm going to put ego. Ego, or you can call it nafs, or one's own opinion. This is at the bottom. And the reason it's the bottom is because this. There might be people who mistake these two as I just mentioned. But the idea, if you really press them on it, is where are these ideas of yours coming from? So when we're talking about, for example, let's stick with let's go, I guess, there we go. See, hijab example. Now let's stick with hijab example. I think that one's easy. So, okay. Now, question. Hijab is mentioned in the Quran, yes or no? I hope the answer is yes. I know people, it is. We had a session on this, a sister session as well, proving that, but it is in the Quran. Maybe not the word and the way that we like, but it is mentioned there. Is it mentioned in the hadith, the rules for it? I'm sure most of you haven't gone through it, but yes, the rules are mentioned there too, right? Now, usually there's nothing really in the aql actually, part of this is tied to the ayah of Quran. So as an example, the ayah that's usually mentioned is, that they're supposed to let down their khimar, right? That's the ayah that's usually referenced for hijab. I forgot the exact Arabic, but it basically says, let down their hijab so it covers their chest. So a lot of people, they say, well, if that's what it says, then it says nothing about the hair. All it says is that you have to cover your chest, that's it. I said, okay, this is where you need now to actually apply the aql. Is that, look, if they were already covering their hair, meaning there's already a bandana that's what they were wearing. So the traditional way that they were performing it back then, certain tribes, is that they tied a bandana, but everything else basically they were showing, right? So Allah said, look, you're already doing a part of it, so now all you have to do is untie that part. That's literally what the word darb means there. Untie it and drape it over. You've already got half of it, just finish it up, right? That's it. That's all it means. So anybody who's using their aql or intellect would say, yeah, it's not saying only cover that part. It's saying whatever you've got, no problem, but just complete it or finish it off. Or the other ayat which says that women, when they are qawa'id, right, when they reach that elder age, then these hijab rules are relaxed for them. I said, okay, fine. Now if somebody says to you, look, hijab just means modesty. Okay, hijab means modesty, right? If hijab just means modesty, And then we have another ayah in the Quran that says when women reach that older age, hijab's not wajib. So are you saying that modesty is not wajib for somebody when they're older? That a woman, when she's reached that age, now she can run around in an immodest fashion? Is that what you're saying the Quran's saying? Like, no, that's where you apply your intellect and say that clearly doesn't make any sense. The ayat are obviously talking about something different. And the traditional ruling is that, yes, the rules are relaxed, meaning for women who are elder, that no, they still have to cover up, but they don't have to be, if they decide not to be super strict about, one or two hair showing or, like a little bit of skin here and there, God's like, it's not a big deal anymore. You're older. Sorry for me saying this, woman, but nobody's after you anymore, right? You can't have kids and stuff like that. So the basic physical premises are gone. Obviously, for people before that, when they're of marriageable age and where they can have children and things like that, obviously it's a different conversation. So that's intellectual. That's an aqli argument. Not that, hijab means modesty in every age and every time. Like, what does that mean now? Are you saying that the Quran now applied this place and time is that when women become older, they can run to like a nude beach? Like, what kind of argument are you making? So this is not a rational argument. So that's where sometimes this can apply here too. Now, this idea of ego and nafs and opinion is that all this stuff is flipped around. Like this is what you normally should be the last one. When it's God-centric, then basically the ego comes first, your own nafs, your own ideas and opinion, and says, you know what? Let me tell the Quran what makes sense and doesn't make sense. The Quran says polygamy is allowed. I think it doesn't make sense. I don't like the way that it sounds. No. The Quran has rules about khums and zakat and jizya that non-Muslims in an Islamic civilization have to pay taxes. I don't like that stuff. It doesn't make sense to me, right? The way that the prophets and the imams practice their lives, I don't think that makes sense. It's not for our time. So all of these things, and then same thing, right? These classical scholars, they don't know what they were talking about. Things have improved. Times have changed. What's going on here is that this is just a bunch of I statements, right? I feel this. I believe that. That's it. All of these are subservient to one's own opinions on things. Whereas the other way around, when we're God-centric, is that God, you call the shots, and I'm going to make my ego and my nafs subservient to you. As the Quran says, سَمِعْنَا وَأَطَعْنَا. That's what mu'mineen say. We hear, we obey. Even if I don't understand what's going on behind the scenes. Even if I might think something is beneficial. Allah says, sometimes you think something's beneficial, but it's actually harmful for you. You don't know. And sometimes you think something's harmful for you, but it's actually beneficial. And then Allah in the ayah specifically says, Wallahu ya'lam, Allah knows, wa antum la ta'lamun. You don't know. Allah's saying, look, this framework is never going to work for you because there's going to be things you don't understand. I'm jumping around from different points, but because it's part of the conversation. This is also why we have this specific idea of the sunnah in the first place. When Allah said, look, there is some deficiency over here. This is not going to give you everything. That's why we're sending prophets in the first place. وَيَعْلَمُهُ الْكِتَابِ وَالْحِكْمَةِ, right? وَيُزَكِّيهِمْ. They've come to say, look, we're here to help you perfect your aql. Why? Because your aql is imperfect. It's incomplete. We're sending down a Quran. We're sending down Ahlul Bayt so that you guys can start thinking in a more proper way. But the idea is if you could have thought about it on your own, there's no point in a prophet then. There's no point in the imams because we could have figured it out. The Quran would have been useless. And even now, if you look at individuals who use their intellects in the other meaning, which I would say the ego meaning, even them, why can't they come to any conclusions right now? I want to give another example. If you can recite a salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. No, I'll give the example some other time. There's actually some questions. Let me jump to that before we get lost in these things. Okay. Somebody is asking, what is the, let me highlight, sorry. Okay. What is the difference between free will and listening to your heart or intuition? So what's the difference? Well, free will is that you are in charge of, a certain range of actions in your life, right? I can decide right now what color I want to pick, right? Now, I think, yeah. Well, I tried green, that didn't work out. But so I get to decide what color I want to pick. That's my free will. I can decide when to take a sip of water, generally speaking, right? So these are within my purview. I have volition. I have the ability. God's given me the free will to do all that. Now, heart intuition, which is the next part of the conversation we're going to have to go into, that is one of the ways that can help us inform our free will-based decisions. You can follow your heart. You can follow the Quran. You can follow the Sunnah. You can follow your intellect. You can follow the consensus. You can follow what a lot of people do. You can follow common sense, which is going to be the next point we bring up. So these are just different ideas, but they're in different spaces. So your heart or intuition, if you were using that word, it can tell you something, right? It can maybe tell you that, you know what, you maybe should have another samosa or another cup of chai, where maybe it's not the best idea for you to do that. But that's really the point that we have to get to, is what does it actually mean when your heart or your intuition tells you something, right? That's sort of the main topic that we have to get to tonight. Okay. Somebody's asking about my favorite soccer team. I'll leave that for next week. Somebody else, let's see. This may be too broad, but what are the major points, aspects, ethos of his theology, ideology, beliefs in a nutshell? If we have time towards the end, maybe I'll do that. The one that I'm focusing on tonight is that your intuition, that's his word, your intuition can inform and tell you and help you go through and decipher all of these different things. That's sort of the main idea. But now what I want to do is start the first part of the conversation, inshallah. If you can recite a salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. I should have lifted that up, actually. Yeah, you know what? That's okay. Okay. One more salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Okay. So the whole thing we're talking about right here is intuition. And it's funny because even this questioner, rightly so, I think, put the word heart. So there's obviously different ideas about what we mean by intuition. The first thing we need to figure out is, what does this word even mean? I asked this individual to define it. I didn't get a clear definition. I didn't get a clear answer. And the point in me asking the individual to define it was because if we're on different pages about this, then we're not going to be able to have a conversation. So we also need to figure out what is meant here by intuition. And I guarantee even in this room, we're going to have multiple different definitions too. So what does intuition mean? What are some examples of it or another synonyms for it? What do you think? Hasan, yeah. A lot of people will use the word fitra, right? It's your sort of godly nature. Your divine nature. Hasan. Okay, what else? Instinct, right? Especially like when you say your gut instinct or your gut feeling, right? Okay. But also just keep shouting them out if you have anything. One of them you mentioned before too. Aql, right? Somebody will say that's what actually the intuition is. It's your aql, your intellect, which is all this stuff, right? That's the way they might define it as well. And then we'll do maybe one more. Oops. And the last one some people say is common sense. Right? And this one is more of a sort of social norms thing. Everybody knows it, right? Let's go through each of them now, right? And see how they could apply. So this one is sort of probably the vaguest one I think on here. You say that your heart tells you or heart makes you, pushes you towards something. Well, what does that mean? That's just some sort of feeling. And that could be right or wrong, right? Your heart can tell you the right or wrong thing. The heart, in the lowest part of it, the nafs, can push you towards doing the wrong thing, right? That's the whole problem with the ego and the nafs in the first place. So this vague notion of heart, if it's impure, is not going to help you make the right decision. Like, okay, what about fitra? Well, that's pretty much the same thing too, right? Technically, our fitra, yeah, it's been connected to God, but it can also be polluted and made impure as well. When we hear false ideas, right? For example, when we are subject to a lot of sin in a society or an environment, that can pollute our fitra. Basically, we are all created with, let's say, default, like a standard operating procedure and software, so to speak. But that can be edited and messed with a little bit. That's why, if you look at most other Muslim societies, they don't have these same issues that you and I do. Because Over there, the fitras are less polluted, meaning it's a godly environment a lot of them have. They're hearing Quran constantly. They're talking about Islam more. I mean, you get in a taxi in Iran, the first thing they say to you is, Ya Ali, right? Before salam, they say Ya Ali sometimes, right? So you're getting these constant reminders. That helps your fitra, they kind of purify itself and stay intact. Over here, we see growing atheism, right? We're being challenged for every single idea that we believe in. Not just from non-Muslims, not just from Sunnis, but from our own people. You know, obviously, the examples over here. Our own people are making us challenge that, so that's going to mess with us a little bit and put us in doubt. When you're in a state of doubt and confusion, and you don't have that divine connection anymore. Now, the ideal is that you go back to the sources, but I already mentioned that. So, same thing, it's just a sort of feeling. How do you know what is your fitra, what's not your fitra? I could say, you know, my fitra is telling me that, that uncle who was, you know, making fun of me last week, my fitra said I should have punched him in the face. Like, what if I said my fitra told me that? And especially a New Jersey fitra might have told me that, actually, too. So it could be right or wrong, right? So that same thing applies. Now, instinct. What is instinct? It's just sort of a reaction, right? Without thinking about it. So you're in class, and somebody next to you drops their pencil on the floor, or their pen on the floor. I don't know how many people are still writing nowadays, but imagine you're using writing utensils, and they fall down. You don't have to rationally sit there and say, well, let's see. He dropped the pencil on the floor and it's this distance away from me. If I bend down, there's a chance I might fall out of my seat. Or maybe they can reach it before me. No, on instinct, you just bend down and try to pick it up, right? It's a reflex. That's all it is. Or if somebody's coming behind you, whoever it is, normally, I mean, there's a formula for it according to Larry David, but normally you, a few of you got the reference at least, right? You leave the door open, you hold the door open so they can come through. Right? That's the polite thing to do. It's normal. It's instinct that you just hold it. You're not calculating. Again, unless you're Larry David, then maybe you do calculate a little bit. There is some formula for that. But generally, it's just something you just respond and you do. That's it. Now, aql, intellect, we talked a little bit about that. So it could be that as well. But again, the point here is this. Can the intellect be false? Can we have rational ideas that lead us in the wrong direction? The idea is, yeah. It's not like somebody's going to go and say, yeah, the ideas I heard are really irrational, illogical, but I really like them. No, nobody thinks that. Everybody thinks what they do is actually rational and logical. We all think we're like that. But how many people have actually studied logic? There's a whole science, ilm al-mantiq, the science of logic. It's a discipline. How do you know what's a rational proof or not? I guarantee the majority don't. There are some ideas that we know instinctively, right? Again, the whole A, B, B, C, A, C, right? Transitive sort of idea. That's built into our aql. You don't have to think about that. That just happens naturally. But when somebody's framing an argument where, you know, again, I don't want to give examples, but sometimes in the way that they frame it, it seems like it's being rational. But again, part of the science is that you determine that, look, what's actually happening here is not actually a rational proof. And only people who are trained in that would know that this is a fallacy. Right? There's genetic fallacies, ad hominem attacks, all these different ways that somebody can make it seem like what they're doing is rational and logical, but it actually isn't. So, okay. And then the final one is this idea of common sense or social norms, right? Okay, burping in public. Okay, common sense says don't do it. It's really gross, right? And maybe if like an elder does it, you can let them okay, they're from a different time and place. You can let that stuff slide a little bit, right? Or I remember when I was growing up, I used to hear certain speakers on the minbar actually just not just burp, but like belch, like you know it's like the one that had weight to it. Like it was really weird, and they just kept on with the middle of the reciting an ayah, like blah, and then they just kept going. So for me, I'm like, this is really strange, but I'm like, whatever. I guess that's the way things are. I don't know. So these are all possible ideas of intuition. This could mean any of these things. At the general, when really boiled down to it, it's this idea is that it has to be something internal. It's some sort of feeling, some sense that you have that you don't really think about too much. It should be automatic, right? But the whole point that we're going to try to show is that, look, this automatic feeling, this sort of auto right and wrong, maybe we may be confusing it. We may not know, and we don't know whether something is actually a right or a wrong feeling. And we've all have actually the intuition to know that that's how intuition works. Because sometimes you might think intuitively, but based on instinct, I should do this, to then find out later, 5 seconds later, or 5 minutes later, or 5 days later, or months later, that actually that was a big mistake. In the moment, I got heated. I thought it was the right thing to do. I thought, I should yell or scream, or I thought I should not say anything. But then after thinking about it, I realized that was the wrong idea. I made the wrong choice. So even in the way that we use the word intuition, that we know that it's not infallible. It's not perfect. It's subject to, it can be messed up. And that's why even in the English language, we have the idea of false intuition. Right? You can have a false idea that doesn't make sense, what you think is right. The whole point that we're trying to get across is that we have to have a set of rules to determine what is this right and wrong stuff, which brings us back, in a sense, full circle. That's why we have the Quran. That's why we have the Sunnah. That's why we have all these other principles. Even the ulama, the sort of orthodoxy method. The idea is that's supposed to keep us in line to see if we're really straying from what are basic sources and ideas in terms of Islamic knowledge. Now, when we have some new individual coming and giving completely antithetical, very contradictory, strange ideas in terms of Islam, right? About hijab and khums and whatever it happens to be. Unorthodox ideas. Not to say that being unorthodox is wrong, but you would say, look, if that's what you're going to present, you better have a lot of evidence. And you would assume, too, that there should be some support, too. But then the question is this. Why is the support only from individuals who, again, forgive me for saying this, usually, by their own admission, don't have a very Islamic, strong Islamic backing in the first place? Going back to that speaker's own point. He himself, and I agree, that people don't have a good idea of what is right and wrong in Islam. So if you already don't know proper Islamic ideology, if you don't have a good grasp of who God really is, then when somebody else comes and gives a different idea of God, how are you going to be able to judge? By his own admission, you can't tell. So why now automatically, instinctively, is this going to make sense? Or let's go the other way. Why is it that, I don't think this is going out on a limb, but there is no support, or maybe like 0.0001% support among various ulama in the English-speaking world? Why is it that everybody says that, no, these ideas don't make any sense and they're false? Not based in the Quran, not based in the Hadith. You would assume that, okay, maybe it's contradictory, so the majority are against it. Even if you want to be a conspiracy theorist and say the house is corrupt, scholars are corrupt, and they're all getting paid, they're not getting paid, but whatever it is, like this is what's going on. Like, look, at least 1, 2, there should be like 3 or 4 people who are like, yeah, these ideas actually do make sense. And they would go on a crusade and help this individual out. But it's not there. And just because somebody might respond, well, they go to the institution and they present on things. I said, yeah, they do. But they present on different ideas. Not the exact same idea that he has. If that idea was presented, you would see a whole different light. And if you ask these same scholars who are presenting papers in the institution, it's because it's an academic environment among scholars on very specific things, whether it's the inauthenticity or authenticity of a certain dua or ziyarah. Okay, that's a, ilmi discussion, fine. But this idea of human intuition being a role in this, why are you throwing them in with everything? That's not the case. I'd say you can go and ask any of these individuals, those who are there firsthand, who have been a part of it. I have very good friends who have been a part of some of these sessions and have presented papers there. And they themselves know, like, look, we have talked to this sheikh. Like, these ideas are ridiculous, but we don't see any coherence from them. So whatever, this is an academic environment. You don't have to agree with the person who's founded an institution. You can say, I'm coming to present something, and that's it. So that's their sort of logic on why they would do that. But if you look out right now in the Shia world, again, if I'm wrong, you can come and challenge me. Find me English-speaking scholars, real scholars who actually support these ideas. And then again, look at those individuals who are lay people who are supporting the ideas. There's a weird discrepancy here. The ones in the know who have studied this stuff, they don't support it. They say it's really bad and very dangerous. The ones who do support it usually don't have a strong Islamic backing in the first place. And when they're confronted with the other side, either just shut down or have nothing to say, or just kind of go to ad hominem attacks or say, oh, you're just jealous, or whatever. They just make up these sort of ideas. When ayat are presented against it, when hadith are presented against, there's no response for that. That makes sense? Okay. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Okay. All right, so we got a lot more questions that jumped in. I knew this was going to happen. And I want to stop because we only set aside around 40 minutes for this, so I don't want to go too much over time. And this is the other disclaimer that I wanted to make, which I think I have to make now. It's very clear that this conversation is going to have to happen again. So I think probably for the next few months, for our monthly sessions, we're going to continue with the same topic. What I'll probably do is split it up like this. Maybe the first 10 minutes or so, I'll go through the points that I want to go through. And then I'll try to leave everything else up to the questions that are there. Because even right now, if I'm looking at it, whereas what? Besides my favorite soccer team. Actually, I can answer that now. I don't watch soccer, so I don't have a favorite soccer team, right? Yeah. Like somebody's asking, where does the fitra actually come in? Well, good question. The other question that the person asked, what are the major points and aspects? Which actually, maybe I'll end with that. So there's a lot of, okay. If I even mention the questions, it's going to trigger me and I'm going to have to start answering them, which I don't want to do because we're over time. So let me leave with this idea, right? Just some basic ideas of this individual so we have an idea. And again, some of you might be asking too, oh, should we go and listen? And I have addressed this topic before. And my humble advice, based on I think everything I've said should be, and I think you'd understand, is no, don't. Why? Because if you think that you have enough backing, your iman is strong enough where you can know what is right and wrong, I'd say, look, you're going to fall into the same trap. I don't think you will. And more so is because the people who are getting confused, because I know a lot of people have gone, only maybe 2 or 3 have actually come up to me and said, look, we're really confused. Can you please answer this? The other ones who I know are confused, because I saw their faces, haven't said a thing yet. And I know that there's not going to be a way they can actually research this. So if you know you're not going to spend time, right? Remember, I think a few weeks ago, or maybe a month or so ago, we shared this hadith from Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ali ibn Abi Talib, alayhi salatu wassalam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa. That if you're I'm paraphrasing, if you're looking for ilm and real knowledge, you don't want to be a jahil, then it's going to take you putting in your blood, sweat, and tears. You have to strive for it. It's not an easy thing, especially if you want to go into these deeper discussions, especially if people are going to start quoting ayat of the Quran, especially if they're going to quote a hadith. If they're going to do all of that, you have to have a good knowledge base to respond. If you're going to go there, and I've heard these exact words from people, like, wow, his knowledge of the Quran is really strong. I'd say, yeah, maybe the first, or a few ayat which are in his support, which you could say the same thing about Wahhabis and Salafis, or anybody else, even any other progressive or traditional person. People love to just take whatever ayat, fulfill their own purpose, and anything else they want to exclude and toss away, right? And again, if we had time, I would have gone through some of them, but we'll save that for next month. So the basic ideas are this, right? So number 1, we've got the idea of human intuition. God has built this all into us. We know the difference between right and wrong. It's there, okay? Then it goes to the second idea is that, I'm not going to use the fancy words, but we are in flux, that we are morally growing and improving. Human beings are constantly improving and changing. That's his idea, right? Not mine, because I disagree, obviously. Then, again, I'm kind of quickly summarizing it. Because of that, then we have this idea of time and place. Because of this new time and place that we live in, because we know that humans are growing morally, existentially, whatever these fancy words are, we're getting smarter and smarter. We know what is right and wrong. Why? Because we have the intuition. Therefore, anything in Islam, in the Quran, in the Hadith, now becomes subject to time and place, becomes subject to our moral growth, becomes subject to our intuition, which again, for me, means ego. Means you and I get to decide what Islam is and shouldn't be in any time and place. That's the quickest summary I think I can do. And what that means is you can then figure out what is right and wrong. Hijab, right or wrong, up to you. Or one of the examples that's given, allowing somebody of a different faith like a Hindu to come and pray to their idols, whatever, in your own home, that should be instinctively okay for you. One example is qasr prayers. Oh, because time and place have changed, qasr rules need to change. So it's basically saying that our intuition knows best, so let that start dictating how we can change Islam and make it fit in this time and place. Again, the issue will be, how far back and forth are we going to go with that? And the examples that I had given to this individual I can't call it a Q&A because it wasn't that way, but I gave just, one example is LGBTQ stuff, right? LGBTQ plus, all that stuff. I said, look, this idea, without saying anything further to get anybody or myself kicked out or banned or canceled or whatever, it's obviously very clear that this stuff has been changing. When I was growing up, the norm was, this stuff was bad and wrong and gross and all that, right? And then as time progressed, all of a sudden, psychologists edited the DSM with no good reason. If you look in the actual literature, there was no good reason for it. But they edited things. And then in the media, it started to grow and it started to progress more and more and more. So then after, one day, it was bad, it was immoral, then it became good. So are you saying that at one point it was fine and now it's good? They're going to have to prove from all this stuff that that's how it happens, right? And that makes sense. And for those who follow social trends right now, very disgusting ones too, gender fluidity. Is that what we're supposed to be doing right now? Allah says, I created you as men and women. Are you going to say that, no, God is wrong here, it's actually fluid? We self-identify, that's how it works. Okay? Or what about, what was the other one? My favorite one actually is polygamy. When I say favorite one, you know what I mean. I don't want to get in trouble. This one, right? Because at the time of, right, the Prophet and the Ahlul Bayt, right? So back then, in this barbaric era, as they unfortunately put it, they say, look, it was, sorry, yeah, I'm just going quick. It was okay then, right? It was good at that time. And for so many other years. Now, they say in our time, that's what they claim, it's wrong. Is that actually true? No, because right now, what everybody's arguing for is polyamory. So, it's funny, these individuals are making the argument, no, polygamy is bad, it's wrong, nobody likes that. But they're arguing for that same stuff right now anyway. Yeah, have, a side partner, have a mistress, have, somebody else on the side. It's okay. And there's people, I don't watch TikTok, I'm not on it, I'll never download it, I promise you. But I at least know what the heck is going on there. And there are specific trends on talking about, how to get the most out of your polyamorous relationship. Please do not go search for this stuff. But yeah, this stuff is out there. So I'm saying now that, look, one day this person's saying, yeah, it was fine for their time, but now it's bad for our time. Like, well, are you sure about that? Because everybody nowadays is saying that it's fine. So maybe it's you and your ego that doesn't like it so much, but everybody else in society thinks it's fine. And then, when we get to the worst one of all, okay, I'm not going to write it. What are you going to do when it comes to pedophilia? Because the same thing applies there too. If little girls were getting married young at this age, now you're saying we've progressed. It's disgusting. Well, if you look at all those people right now, they're saying the word pedophilia needs to go down the drain too. Right? And they're trying to argue for it, and you see how it is in the media. They're pushing for these ideas, this disgusting trend. But they're pushing for the idea that, no, it's okay, right? This is just expression of love between people of different ages. Don't be an ageist, or whatever they want to say. So this is just shifting ideas. There is no objective criteria for any of this stuff. If tomorrow any of this changes or anything becomes good, then they're going to say, yeah, that's fine, because that's what society says. That's what our intuition tells us. But that's really not a strong source of determining what is right and wrong. We as Muslims have objective right and wrong, not subjective, not relative. We have the Quran, we have the Sunnah, that's what tells us what is right and wrong. You and I don't get a part in the equation. Now, how we prove all of that? Inshallah, we'll continue with that next time. Yeah, because whatever, I'm already way past it, I might as well. Any last sort of quick questions or comments or anything? No? Okay. So yeah, next month, inshallah, we will continue this. We'll keep going with the same idea. What we're going to start off with, and again, you're welcome to do your own research, although, like again, I'm saying it's not worth it, and I would say it's a bad idea to go and listen to these lectures and things like that. I don't think it's beneficial. But we're going to talk about, okay, we have all those definitions of intuition, but we already know that there's real thinking and fake thinking, real intuition and false intuition. How can sometimes the way that we come to conclusions actually be examples of false intuition or thinking? Now, their response might be, look, we've got proofs in the Quran. The Quran says, why don't you do tafakkur? أَفَلَا يَتَفَكَّرُونَ. Why don't you do ta'aql? Why don't you use your aql? أَفَلَا تَعَقِلُونَ. Why don't you think and reflect and ponder? So they'll come back and say, look, the Quran is saying use your aql, contemplate and ponder. So our question is that actually what the ayat mean? Or again, are they taking it out of context? So we'll start with those discussions next month, inshallah. والحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله. السلام عليك يا ابن رسول الله. السلام عليك ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا وارث آدم صفة الله. السلام عليك يا وارث نوح النبي الله. السلام عليك يا وارث إبراهيم خليل الله. السلام عليك يا وارث موسى كليم الله. السلام عليك يا وارث عيسى روح الله. السلام عليك يا وارث محمد حبيب الله. السلام عليك يا وارث علي أمير المؤمنين ولي الله. السلام عليك يا ابن محمد المصطفى. السلام عليك يا ابن علي المرتضى. السلام عليك يا ابن فاطمة الزهراء. السلام عليك يا ابن خديجة الكبرى. السلام عليك يا ثار الله وابن ثاره والوتر الموتور. أشهد أنك قد أقمت الصلاة وآتيت الزكاة وأمرت بالمعروف ونهيت عن المنكر وأطعت الله ورسوله حتى أتاك اليقين. فلعن الله أمة قتلتك ولعن الله أمة ظلمتك ولعن الله أمة سمعت بذلك فرضيت به. يا مولاي يا أبا عبد الله، أشهد أنك كنت نورا في أصلاب الشامخة والأرحام مطهرة، ولم تنجسك الجاهلية بأنجاسها، ولم تلبسك من مدلهمة ثيابها. وأشهد أنك من دعائم الدين وأركان المؤمنين. وأشهد أنك الإمام البر التقي الرضي الزكي الهادي المهدي. وأشهد أن الأئمة من ولدك كلمة التقوى وأعلم الهدى والعرفة الوثقى والحجة على أهل الدنيا، والأشهد الله وملائكته وأنبياءه ورسله أني بكم مؤمن وبيا بكم موقن بشرائع ديني وخواتيم عملي، وقلبي لقلبكم سلم وأمري لأمركم متبع. صلوات الله عليكم وعلى أرواحكم وعلى أجسادكم وعلى أجسامكم وعلى شاهدكم وعلى غائبكم وعلى ظاهركم وعلى باطنكم. زيارة علي أكبر عليه السلام. السلام عليك يا ابن رسول الله. السلام عليك يا ابن نبي الله. السلام عليك يا ابن أمير المؤمنين. السلام عليك يا ابن الحسين الشهيد. السلام عليك أيها الشهيد وابن الشهيد. السلام عليك أيها المظلوم وابن المظلوم. لعن الله أمة قتلتك ولعن الله أمة ظلمتك ولعن الله أمة سمعت بذلك فرضيت به. زيارة شهداء كربلاء. السلام عليكم يا أولياء الله وأحباء. السلام عليكم يا أصفياء الله وأوداء. السلام عليكم يا أنصار دين الله. السلام عليكم يا أنصار رسول الله. السلام عليكم يا أنصار أمير المؤمنين. السلام عليكم يا أنصار فاطمة سيدة النساء العالمين. السلام عليكم يا أنصار أبي محمد الحسن بن علي الولي الناصح. السلام عليكم يا أنصار أبي عبد الله. بأبي أنتم وأمي طبتم وطابت الأرض التي فيها دفنتم وفزتم فوزا عظيما. فيا ليتني كنت معكم فأفوز فوزا معكم. زيارة حضرت عباس عليه السلام. السلام عليك يا ابن أمير المؤمنين. السلام عليك أيها العبد الصالح مطيع لله ولرسوله. وأشهد أنك قد جاهدت ونصحت وصبرت حتى أتاك اليقين. لعن الله الظالمين لكم من الأولين والآخرين وألحقهم بدرجة الجحيم. زيارة إمام رضا عليه السلام. السلام عليك يا مولاي وابن مولاي. السلام عليك يا غريب الغرباء. السلام عليك يا سلطان أبا الحسن علي بن موسى الرضا ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا صاحب العصر والزمان. الأمان 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 من فتنة الزمان. السلام عليك يا خليفة الرحمن. السلام عليك يا إمام الإنس والجان. السلام عليك يا مظهر الإيمان. السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن. السلام عليك يا قاطع البرهان. السلام عليك يا إمام زماننا هذا. عجل الله فرجك وسهل الله مخرجك وظهورك. السلام عليك ورحمة الله وبركاته. اللهم صل على محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم كل وليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. سورة المباركة الفاتحة مع الصلوات.